This is an instructional video on how to replace the reed switch sensors on the Compaction Technologies low profile compactor. The tools you'll need for this job are as follows: a 3/8 inch socket head, a socket wrench, and a 6-inch socket extension. I use a 1/4 inch drive for these, a wire cutter and stripper in one tool, a wire cutter or some other method of cutting zip ties, a fine tip flathead screwdriver or jeweler's screwdriver for moving wires in and out of WAGO connectors, and a tape measure. You should also have a package sent to the store that you can get from the store manager containing the replacement reed sensor switches. The first step in this process is to remove the machine top. For specific instructions on how to do that, please see the separate video. Once you have the top off, if you have not already done so, please disconnect the machine from a power source if it is plugged in. Once you have the top off and the machine unplugged from a power source, it's a good idea to walk to the back of the compactor, grab a tape measure, and take a picture of the arrangement of the reed switches, denoted by the different color screws, and the position of each reed switch on the main actuator in inches, because we'll need to place the new switches at the same lengths along the actuator. Once you've taken a picture of the reed switches height and placement, you're going to come over to the circuit board and take a picture of one of the reed switch WAGO connectors. I recommend the one closest to you, furthest to the left, right here. You're going to want to take a look at how the wires go into the WAGO connector when placed on the circuit board and take a picture of that. Once you've taken those pictures, you're going to want to take the reed switches off the main actuator. Before we unscrew them and slide them off, however, we're going to want to unplug them from the circuit board and then take the wires out of their respective WAGO connectors. The 3 reed switch WAGO connectors are the 3 on the circuit board furthest to the left, closest to you, right here. These 3. So we're going to want to unplug those first. Now we have them unplugged. To take the wires out of the WAGO connector, you're going to want to hold the WAGO connector with the wires facing down, and you're going to want to insert the fine flathead screwdriver or jeweler's screwdriver into the slot above, sort of at an upward angle. Once you've pushed it in as far as it can go, you're going to want to leverage or push the tip down and pull out the wire. Repeat that for the white wire. That's how you get the wires out of the WAGO. Repeat for the other 2 WAGOs. After you've pulled all the wires out of the WAGOs, make sure you save the WAGOs as we might need them later. Now you're going to want to gently pull the wires through the opening towards the electronics tray so you can take the reed switches off the main actuator. To do so, it is probably easiest to do 1 wire at a time to start. Also, at this point, if the reed switch wires have any tape on them, you're going to want to take the tape off to pull the wires through the hole in the electronics tray. Once you have the wires pulled through the hole that leads to the electronics tray, you're going to want to simply unscrew the screws holding the reed switches in place by hand, as they are just hand tightened, and slide them off of the actuator. Once you have them slid off, simply pull them off and set them aside. At this point, you should grab the new reed switches you will be placing on the actuator. You will note that they have been sent with WAGOs attached to the end, but to thread them to the electronics tray, we're going to have to take the WAGOs off. Simply use the same technique you used to take them off on the old reed switches. Once you have taken the WAGO connectors off of the new reed switches, you're going to want to put the reed switches on one at a time and thread the wires through to the electronics tray, put in the WAGO and plug it into the board so you don't lose track of which wires go to which switch. Since the reed switch with the silver screw goes on furthest up the actuator, we're going to slide that one on first. Take the reed switch, fit it into the 2 rail grooves on top of the main actuator, and slide it up. Tighten it down a little bit so it doesn't slide too much, but not so much because we're going to have to move it later. Then take the wires on the reed switch and thread them through the hole that goes to the electronics tray. Once you have the wires threaded through the hole to the electronics tray, you're going to want to take the wires and put them back into the Wago connector and then plug it into the board. To put it back in the Wago connector, hold it so that the Wago connector slots where the wires go are at the bottom and the part where you insert the screwdrivers at the top. Put the screwdriver in the top hole at an upward angle and hold it firm. Then take the black wire for the reed switch and put it in the first slot furthest to the right. You do this by pushing the tip of the screwdriver down, which should open the pin enough so that the black wire easily slides in. Give it a little tug to make sure that it's in there firmly. You're then going to want to take the white wire from the reed switch and put it in the middle slot. Again, give it a tug to make sure it's in firmly. The silver screwed reed switch corresponds to the home proximity reed switch sensor. So once you have the wires in the Wago, find the Wago input on the board that says home prox and plug the Wago into it. It should be the middle of the three Wagos, and once you plug it in, the black wire should be facing the front of the machine. The next reed sensor switch we want to put on is the red screwed one. So again, slide it in the rails, slide it up, loosely tighten it so that it doesn't move around a whole lot, and then follow the same process of threading the wires through and putting them into a Wago connector. Once you have the wires from the red screwed reed switch in the Wago, you're going to want to take the Wago and plug it into the full Wago input. That one is the furthest to the left towards you. The last reed switch we're going to put on is the blue screwed one. So again, follow the procedure of sliding it onto the rails, screwing it on loosely just so it stays in place, threading the wire through the hole to the electronics tray, and putting it on the Wago connector. Once you have the wires from the blue screwed reed switch threaded through and put in the Wago, you're going to plug the Wago into the extend prox input on the circuit board. It should be the third one in from the left closest to you. Right there. Once you have the wires all plugged into the Wago and plugged back into the circuit board, we're going to want to go over and put them to the height from the picture you took at the beginning of the process. Once you have the reed switches on and them all plugged into the Wago input on the circuit board, we're going to want to make sure that they're at the right height. So you're going to want to take the tape measure and put them at the distances that you measured in the picture. The blue one should be about right at the bottom of the tape measure at 0 inches. So you're going to want to adjust it and then hand tighten the screw down to keep it in place. Next, we're going to want to do the red screwed reed sensor switch. This one we wanted about 2 1/4 inches from the bottom. So again, you're going to want to put it at the right spot and just hand tighten the screw down. Finally, we're going to move the silver screwed reed switch. We want this one at about 5 1/8 inch from the bottom. And again, you're going to want to hand tighten that down. The silver screwed reed switch is the most important one to get right height-wise. It is important that the head comes up to the right spot. The tape measure should hook on the beginning of the rail right here. And now we're going to want to test out the machine to make sure that the screws are in the right spot and that the machine functions as we want it. First, you're going to need to plug the machine into a power source. Once you have the machine plugged into a power source, we're going to want to put it through a compaction cycle to make sure that the head comes up to the right height. To do so, take the machine key and quickly turn it to the 3 9 position and then back to the 12 6 position to initiate a compaction cycle. When the head comes up and is stopped, you're going to want to measure the distance that the head height is from this back support bracket. Put your tape measure at this part of the compactor head, the little L bracket, and then read off where it is on the top bracket there. We want it at about 6.5 to 6 5/8 inches. As you can see right now, it's just short of 6, so it's way too high, and we're going to need to adjust the silver screwed reed sensor. Because it came up too high, we're going to want to move the reed switch down towards the red screwed reed switch a little bit. So loosen the screw and move it down about 1/8 of an inch or so. Normally, when you move the reed switch, it should compact, but if for some reason it doesn't, use the key again to initiate a compaction cycle. As you can see, the head has now not come up quite far enough, so we need to adjust the silver screwed reed switch again. Because it needs to come up only a little bit more, you're going to want to loosen the silver screw again and move it up just a hair. And if it compacts, make sure you screw it back down before it reaches the top. We're still about 1/8 of an inch or so short, so we're going to move it up just a freckle more. As you can see now, the head height comes up to 6.5 inches measured from this top support bar here. You're going to have to go back and forth adjusting the silver screwed reed switch as many times as you need to get it to 6.5 or 6 5/8 inches from this support bar. Once we've made sure that everything works and that the compactor head comes up to the right height, we're going to want to bundle these wires together in this part of the machine. You should have received 2 zip ties along with the new reed switches. So you're going to want to take the first one, make sure all the wires are encompassed, and tighten it a little bit, but not so much that you can't adjust it. And then take the second one and put it also in that same area, and then tighten a little bit so you can adjust it. This one you're going to want to put sort of close to this bracket here and tighten it pretty thoroughly so that they're in a nice bundle. And then the second one you're going to want to slide a little bit towards the input of the electronics tray and tighten that one. You want to have a little bit of slack so that the wires aren't rubbing up against this bracket when it compacts, but not so much that it hangs down and could interfere with the compactor. You want all the slack in the electronics tray portion of the machine over here. Once you have the zip ties on, simply take the wire cutter or whatever other cutting tool you have and cut off the excess zip tie at the nub. Make sure to catch the excess portion of the zip tie. Once you have the zip ties cut, make sure to pull the excess wire through again if it had pulled out at all, again leaving a little slack here. Once you have done that and put the zip ties on the reed switch wires, the next step is to replace the top on the machine. For specific instructions on how to do that, please see the separate video. That is how you replace the reed switch sensors on a Compaction Technology low profile compactor.